Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Oh, that was really quiet. I know you got something better than that. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, that's better. Thank you. So again, my name is Lindsay Scola. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear my voice? Okay, perfect. It's a big room, so I'll just ask that that only one person speak at a time. This will be interactive. People will be coming up, but just so that we can all hear what's going on, I'll just ask that only one person speaks at a time. So again, my name is Lindsay Scola. I am a Student Assistance Program Specialist for Caron Treatment Centers. I have a really long title that basically means that I work with young people around alcohol and other drug issues. Right? So I work for a place called Caron. The main thing that Caron does is we are what you would think of if you've ever heard of a drug or alcohol rehab, right? So it's a facility where people come when they're struggling with addiction to get help, finding a healthier way of life for themselves or their family members or their loved ones. So we've been doing that for about 60 years. And for the last 30 years or so, we've been coming out to schools and to programs like this, to summer camps, to talk with young people and have honest conversations about alcohol and other drugs, right? We do this for a couple of reasons. The first is that we think it's really, really, really important to talk to young people about these things so that you have the best information possible so that you never end up having to come to a place like Caron later in life, right? Because we know that young people are faced with decisions to experiment with alcohol and other drugs every day, right? The truth is, in the next few years, if you haven't already experienced this, it is likely that you will be faced with a choice to try one of the things that we will be talking about today, right? And so what we want to make sure that you have is the right and best information so that you can make the best choice for yourself if and when you're ever in that situation, right? Because no one else is going to be able to make the decision for you. I'm not going to be there to help you. Your counselors aren't going to be there. Likely your family members won't be there to help you through it, right? So you're going to be making these choices for yourself, and we want to make sure that you have the best information possible in order to do that. So just a couple of housekeeping things. You should all have one myth and one fact card. If you don't, raise your hand and one of your counselors will get one to you. Are you missing? Okay, perfect. I will just ask, please don't fold these up or wrinkle them. We try and save trees and reuse them. So if you don't need them now, I'll let you know when you do. And that should be it, right? So as we mentioned, this presentation is called Brain Drain, right? Adolescence and addiction. So when I say the word addiction, what do you think of? Raise your hand if you have. Yes, in the back. Oh, I'm sorry, what? Drugs, right? Absolutely. Yes.
Video games.
Video games, right? Being obsessed, right? Yeah. Cigarettes, for sure. Alcohol, yep. Anything else? Yeah. Marijuana or weed, right? Pot, many different names for marijuana, many different names for drugs. Yeah? Cocaine. So what does it mean what happens when you are addicted to something? I heard obsessed. Yeah. You can't stop using it, right? We'll take one more. The same thing, okay. So essentially what happens when you become addicted to something, and you can become addicted to things like alcohol and other drugs, or things like video games, or shopping, or food, or caffeine, right? You can become addicted to essentially anything. But what happens when a person becomes addicted is that their brain actually changes. And it changes in a way that starts to tell their brain starts to communicate to their body that you need this thing in order to feel okay, right? And so today we're going to talk about alcohol and other drugs and addiction, but just know you can become addicted to anything. The other thing that we're going to talk about today is the young person's brain, right? So there's some things that are unique about your brain at your age right now that make you more susceptible or vulnerable to addiction than maybe someone who's a little bit older. Did you have a question? No? Okay. If you do have questions, raise your hands. We'll try to get to them. I do want to make sure we get through everything, so I may have you hold them till the end, okay? We'll see how it goes. So we're going to learn about the young person's brain and why your brains are very different from someone who's a little bit older and why that's important knowledge to have when you are talking about alcohol and other drugs. Yeah?
Are they not developed?
They are not developed, and we're going to get to that, right? We're going to talk about exactly what specific part. So this picture up here, what do you see? Okay, hands. Who sees a bird or a duck? Who sees a rabbit? Who sees both? Okay. Does anybody not see both? All right. So, one person at a time, please. So if you're looking for the bird or the duck, right, it's facing this way. The beak is like this, right? And his eye is like right here. If you're looking for the bunny rabbit's facing the other way, right? And his nose is right about there, and his ears are pointed back. Do you all see it now? Okay. So why do you think that some of you see, or some people see a rabbit first and some people see a duck first? Yeah. One more time.
Because people have different opinions.
People have different opinions or perspectives, absolutely. Why else might that be? Yep. Okay, so it might depend what side of the room you're on, right? For sure. If you're sitting on this side, you might see the rabbit first because you're looking that way. Yep.
Our brain is not developed, so that's wrong.
So it doesn't actually have to do with brain development, but what it does have to do regarding your brain is that everyone's brain is a little bit different, right? So your brain is not the same as the person sitting next to you. So what that means is, while I'm going to give you some general information today about alcohol and other drugs in your brain, just know that all of these things are going to impact everyone differently because your brains are all unique to you, right? So some things are going to have more or less of an impact than someone else who might be in this room. So what are drugs, right? Drugs are chemicals that change the way that a person's body and brain work, right? So you've probably heard that drugs are bad for you. Why have you heard that drugs are bad? We'll take just a few. Yeah. Okay, so some substances can be very addictive and you can get addicted very quickly, and some have a really high risk of overdose, right, or something bad happening to you physically. Absolutely. Yeah, why else?
Some drugs aren't that bad.
Okay, some drugs aren't that bad, and we're going to get to helpful drugs in just a minute. Yeah, in the back in the gray. Okay, absolutely, right? So alcohol and other drugs are going to affect your decision-making ability, right? And you're probably not going to make the best choices while you're under the influence. Yeah?
So you said something could have more harm, like heroin, more than a cigarette?
Absolutely, right? So immediate harm, right? Certain drugs are going to have much more immediate harm versus other drugs, which, like nicotine, which may have longer-term harm. We'll take two more. Yep? They could make you hurt someone, right? So oftentimes when people become addicted, they end up, you know, emotionally especially hurting the people around them, making decisions that they probably wouldn't make otherwise and impacting the lives of those around them, for sure. They can make you really sick, absolutely, right? So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you guys have come up with, you ladies and gentlemen have come up with that drugs are bad, right? But there are helpful drugs. Right? Anytime, if you've been sick and you've ever gone to the doctor and the doctor's given you a medicine that's helped you get better, that's a good drug, right? There are good drugs. We'll get to questions in a minute, right? So medicines, like antibiotics, things like that, are legal drugs. That means doctors are prescribing them to patients that help people get better, right? Or if you have a cold, then you take cold medicine, right? That's a drug that's intended to help you feel better. Then we have harmful drugs, which are a lot of the ones that you mentioned, right? Cocaine and heroin and marijuana and things like that. Alcohol, right? Alcohol is a drug, right? These are, and cigarettes, right? These are medications and drugs that can be harmful. Some of them might even be legal, right? Cigarettes and alcohol and now marijuana in some states can be legal. Do you have a question? So not all drugs. The marijuana legalization. So marijuana is now legal in Massachusetts under certain circumstances for certain age groups. Unfortunately, and however, you are not in that age group. And so we're going to talk today about why those drugs are still dangerous for people who are your age. We're going to hold questions if we can because we have a lot of stuff to get to, right? So your brain, right, is the command center of your body, right? Your brain is the most important organ in your body. It is responsible for every thought, movement, action, motion, emotion, reaction that you have from the moment you're born until the moment that you die, right? It controls everything. At this point in your life, your brain is not getting any bigger in size, right? It's done growing in size, but it is still developing, right? There's a specific part of your brain that's not done developing. Does anybody have a guess or know what part? Yeah.
Some gland where like you have like different information where you can tell what's good from what's bad.
So it is actually your decision-making part of your brain. Does anybody, what helps you decide good from bad? Yep. Do you know the name of it? Yes. Your prefrontal cortex, awesome job. Or your frontal lobe, right? So it's the part of your brain, it's right here. You actually hit it when you make a bad decision. You're like, ugh, that was a bad idea, right? This part of your brain right here is not fully developed. This is the part that helps you make decisions, right? Does anybody have a guess at what age your frontal lobe or prefrontal cortex is fully developed? Yeah. 23, it's actually a little bit higher than 23. 25 is the low end. Does anybody have a guess what the high end might be? 30. So 25 to 30 is the age range at which your frontal lobe is fully developed, right? So what does that mean? What that means is that because the decision-making part of your brain is not fully developed yet, young people are oftentimes more drawn to riskier decisions than someone who's a little bit older, right? It takes your brain a little bit longer to weigh out pros and cons and look at long-term consequences. So you're more likely to take a risk than someone who's a bit older, especially if you're making the decision quickly, right? So here's an example of a risky decision, right? Bungee jumping. So quick poll, who here would 100% bungee jump? Sign me up, I'm in, I'm doing it. All right? We'll get there. Who here would maybe bungee jump? I gotta do some research. I gotta think about it. Okay. Who here, no way, no how, not happening? All right. So most of the people, we got a pretty risk-taking room, all right? So for the people who would definitely bungee jump, I'm totally in, or the people who would maybe bungee jump, I gotta think about it. What are some things you would wanna know before you jumped off that platform? Yes, in the back. Yep, you, yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm in a safe place to be. Like, I want to make sure the highs are good.
Yeah, right, you wanna make sure that the equipment is up to date and well maintained, right? Absolutely. What other information would you wanna have? Yep. Right, so what's underneath me, right? Literally, so you can kind of see in this one, there's like an inflatable mattress thingy. You want to know what's below you in case something does go wrong, right? What else?
If there's maybe an ambulance nearby.
Yeah, how close am I to a medical facility, right? Am I in the middle of the desert? Is this going to be really bad news if something does happen by accident? Absolutely. You want to do some research on the company, right? Make sure it's a legitimate operation, not just some guy on the side of the road with a rope on a bridge being like, come on, it's super safe, trust me, right? We'll take a couple more. Go ahead. Chance of failure, right? You might want to do a quick Google search on like injuries and deaths related with bungee jumping. All right, we'll take these four more. Yes?
If there's like water, if it does break, then
Yeah, right? What's underneath me? For sure. What else? How far, right? Is this 50 feet? Is this 150 feet, right? That might make a difference for some people. Anything else? One more. Go ahead. Yeah, right. Is this rope going to support my weight? Is it strong enough to support my weight, right? So you all came up with a bunch of really good information you would want to have before you made the risky decision to bungee jump, right? It's the same thing with alcohol and other drugs. We want to make sure that you have the answers to the questions you might have, that you have the best information possible so that you can make the best choice for yourself, again, if and when you're ever faced with these risky decisions, right? Some quick amazing brain facts. Your brain right now weighs about 3 pounds, right? It's the size of a small chihuahua, just like sitting up in your head. It's about that size, right? And again, it's not getting any bigger at this point. Your brain contains 100 billion nerve cells. That is a huge, huge number. And what those nerve cells are doing all day, every day, is sending messages around your brain to control everything in your body so that you can be the person that you are today, right? And how those nerve cells work is that some of them are designed to send messages, and some of the nerve cells are designed to catch and receive them. And in a healthy, functioning brain, that process happens perfectly, and they interlock, right? So one nerve cell sends a message, the other one catches and receives it, and they interlock just like that. Alcohol and other drugs all work by interfering with this message-sending process up in your brain. So some substances are going to speed this process up, some are going to slow it down, some substances are going to jump in the middle and block the messages from being sent or received. And we're going to talk later on about specific substances and how they do that, or what they do. But for right now, just know they all work by interfering with this message-sending process in your nerve cells. A message travels from your brain to your muscles at 250 miles an hour, super fast. Someone figured out if you ironed out all of the wrinkles in your brain, it would have a surface area of 2.5 square feet. Your brain feels soft like butter. It can generate enough electricity to power a light bulb. Your brain is going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How do we know this? How do we know your brain's going 24/7? Yes, in the back, pink. Yep. Yep. Because you're not dead, right? You don't die when you fall asleep at night. Your brain keeps everything going even though you're asleep. You are still awake right now, right? Hands, please. Hands, hands. So what else happens in our sleep that helps us know that your brain is still working? Yeah. Your dreams, right? So even though you might be sleeping, there's still stuff going on to remind you that your brain's still working. The right side of your brain controls the left side of your body, and your brain is faster and more powerful than a supercomputer. So for this next slide, I'm going to need a volunteer, not someone who I spoke to in the beginning, who can see colors okay. Yes, what's your name? Tessa. Tessa? Okay, Tessa. And you can see colors okay? All right. So Tessa, what we're going to do here is you're going to read the color of the word, not the word itself, going across in rows. So I'm going to get you started, okay? So the first row, it's a little bit tricky to see because of the lighting, but it's green, red, blue. You got it? Okay, go ahead.
Yellow, blue, black.
Yep.
Red, blue, green.
Mm-hmm.
Black, red, yellow, green, blue, black, blue, red, green.
Awesome job, Tessa. A round of applause. Boom. You get a pencil. Can you pass that back? Ah, thank you. So, was that easy? Was that hard? It was hard, right? So, was anybody reading along with Tessa being like, no, yeah, I don't know. Anybody? Yeah. This activity is going to be easier for some people than others. I am not one of the people it's easy for. I have done this slide and this activity hundreds and hundreds of times. Every single time I get tripped up at some point. Why is this activity a little bit tricky for us? Yeah, in the back. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? So, number one, some of us, a lot of people just read the word automatically, right? Once you learn to read, you automatically read the word before you look at the color. The other reason is that since you were probably about this big, every time you saw the color yellow, or the word yellow, it was probably in the color yellow or next to the color yellow, right? So your brain automatically has that association. And in this activity, we're asking your brain to do something different than it normally does. The cool thing about human brains is they are amazingly resilient, right? Which means that they are able to take in, process new information super quickly and adjust. So what happened in this activity was at first our brains were like, whoa, 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 what's going on with this words and colors thing? I'm freaking out. I don't think I can do this. But very quickly, our brains were like, oh, hang on, I got this, right? I know my colors. We can totally do this. And you're able to complete the task. Now, there are a couple of things that young people, especially's brains, have a tough time being resilient to or adjusting to. The first one is trauma. So does anybody here play sports or have played sports? Okay, so have anybody, your coaches, adults in your life, talk to you about anything involving your brain and sports? Yeah, concussions, right? So concussions are a type of impact or trauma to your brain that we know is really difficult for young people's brains to bounce back from. Right? That's why if you get a head injury, you have to go for impact testing. They have to keep tracking you to make sure your brain is healing properly, right? The other thing that young people's brains have a really tough time bouncing back from is alcohol and other drug use. So because your brains are still developing, those changes that are happening when you experiment with alcohol and other drugs up in your brain can be permanent, right? So it's just really important to keep in mind that sometimes what may not seem like a big choice, right, can have long-term impacts without even realizing it. So the human brain, what's going on here? Right? Today we're going to talk about 4 main parts of your brain. The first one is your brainstem. Your brainstem is responsible for your basic life functions, right? Things like breathing, blinking, digestion, your heartbeat, all of that stuff is controlled by your brainstem, right? And thank goodness, imagine if you had to remind yourself to beat your heart, right? You wouldn't be able to do anything else. No Snapchatting, no texting, because you're going to spend all your time reminding yourself to beat your heart, right? So luckily, your brainstem takes over for you and helps control all of that stuff. The next part of your brain we're going to talk about today is your cerebral cortex. That's the part of your brain that helps you understand and speak languages, right? That's the part that's helping you understand what I'm saying right now and answer a question when asked. Then we've got your cerebellum, right, which is movement and balance. Raise your hand if you've used your cerebellum today. What did you just use to raise your hand? Your cerebellum, right? Every movement, walking, running, all of that stuff, raising your hand, all of that stuff is controlled by your cerebellum. And the last part of your brain we're going to talk about today is your limbic system. So I like to think of your limbic system as like your favorite place to hang out, right? If you've got a favorite space, whether it's your room, and say like mine's the kitchen, it's where all the food lives, right? Whatever your favorite place to hang out is, that's your limbic system. And we say this because adolescents and young people spend a lot of time in their limbic systems, right? Your limbic system helps you do things like learn new information. Would you say you spend a lot of time at this point in your life learning new stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, right? You're in school most of the day for most of the year learning new things. You get homework, all of that stuff. It helps you create new memories. Do you think you're creating a lot of new memories at this point in your life? Yes. Yeah, right? A lot of the stuff you're doing with friends, with family, with loved ones, with whatever, right? Those are new memories. And then your limbic system also helps you control emotions. Would you say people your age are emotional people? Yeah, right? I see some heavy head shaking, right? So young people, teenagers and young adults feel emotions really strongly at your age, right? If you're having a great day, it's like the best day ever and nothing can touch you and nothing can go wrong. And if you're having a bad day, it feels like there's never been a worse day, right? And it might never get better. Those highs and lows are totally normal for people your age because your limbic system is super active, right? So if you look at these 4 parts of your brain, they make up pretty much everything that you need to be alive and be the individual you are today, right? These 4 parts are also the parts of your brain that are the most impacted by alcohol and other drugs, right? So I'm going to leave this up here for a second. I'm going to ask my 5 volunteers who I spoke to in the beginning to come on down quickly. Okay. So what's your name? Will, I'm going to have you start us off. You're going to come right over here, Will. That's going to be your card. Do you think you can handle that? Yeah. Okay, awesome. What's your name? Danny. Danny, can you do that for me? Next to Will? Sure. Okay, right over here. What's your name? Jordan. Jordan, can you do that for me? Okay, school appropriate, age appropriate, right? What's your name? Heidi, there you go. And Neil, you're going to be our grand finale. We're going to help you with that, okay? I promise. You're just going to have to get us started. Sorry, Will. Neil, right?
I can't see.
Can you scoot down a little bit? Boop, boop. We good? There we go, better. All right, so I need everybody to send Will all of your good vibes. He has a super hard task. Will, can you read your card for me?
Breathe.
He has to breathe. Do you think you got this? No. Do you need a minute? Okay. Okay, you good? Okay, and go. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Best breathing I've seen all year. All right, what's our next card? What do you got?
I have to say the sentence 3 times fast. Unique, New York.
Hit it.
Unique, New York. Unique, New York.
Awesome job. It's not easy, right? Jordan, right? Okay, Jordan, what have you got?
Name any 3 TV shows.
Any 3 TV shows, camp appropriate. Go ahead.
Bubble Guppies.
Okay.
Paw Patrol, and PJ Masks.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Heidi, what have you got?
Wave your hands in the air.
Wave them like you just don't care. Woo! All right, awesome. Round of applause. And our grand finale, Neil, what have you got?
Sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Okay, sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Now here's the deal. Neil is going to get us started off, and we're going to jump in with like the loudest version you got of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in you, okay? You get us started? Yeah. Go ahead. Twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Awesome job. All right. You can leave your cards and grab a pencil or a bracelet. The bracelets change color with your body temperature. Whoop, 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 whoop. Okay. Clap 1 time if you can hear my voice. Clap 2 times if you can hear my voice. Perfect. So as much fun as it is screaming Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? We all love nursery rhymes. There was a point to that activity, right? So we're going to go over what parts of your brain were active in each of those activities. So we had Will's awesome breathing to start us off. Who remembers what part of your brain helps us do things like breathing, basic life functions? Yeah. Your brainstem. Awesome job. Next we had saying unique New York 3 times fast. Who remembers what part helps us with language? Your cerebral cortex. All right. Let's see, what else? We've got, waving our hands in the air like we just don't care. What's movement and balance? Not limbic system. Yeah. Your cerebellum, right? It's a tricky one to say. Yeah, your cerebellum is movement and balance. And then finally we had, let's see. All right, we had to remember 3 TV shows. And then, Neil, you had to, when was the last time you sang Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Was it yesterday?
Last night.
Do you sing it every day? So it's probably been a while, right? For most people, it's been a while. So we had to remember the words to Twinkle, Twinkle and remember 3 TV shows. What helps us with memory and learning? Who remembers that part? Yep. Yes, your brain. What part of your brain? Your limbic system. Awesome job. You guys crushed that, right? So in those 5 quick activities, we saw all of those different parts of your brain at work, right? So now looking at your brain and drugs, right? Drugs are chemicals. Again, they all tap into that communication system up in your brain, and we're now going to look at specific substances and what they do to your brain and body. So the first substance we're going to talk about today is alcohol, right? Alcohol is a drug that is found in beer, wine, and hard liquor. When a person drinks it, it's absorbed through your stomach and your intestines into your bloodstream and up to your brain, where it interferes with that message sending process, right? The parts of your brain that are affected are listed here. So it affects your cerebral cortex, which is language. So what may happen to someone's ability to speak or understand language if they're under the influence of alcohol? What may happen to someone speaking? Anybody have a guess? Yep. So they might become slurred. So slurred speech is one of the most common symptoms that we see for people who are under the influence of alcohol, and that's because of the impact on your cerebral cortex. It's also going to be difficult. Do you have a comment? Yep. Okay. So it's also going to be difficult to understand languages, right? If someone made the poor decision to drink alcohol and you were trying to give them directions to do something, they'd have a really tough time understanding and processing that, right? Alcohol has an impact on your limbic system, which is memory, learning, and emotions. So what may happen to someone's memory, learning, or emotions if they made the poor decision to drink alcohol? Yeah? So driving is actually going to be the next one over, right? But memory, learning, or emotions, yeah? So yes, right? So people may behave in ways, you might have emotional reactions you normally wouldn't, right? People might get really, really happy and excited, and then they might be sad the next minute, right? Or they might get angry. People who are normally pretty happy might have different emotional reactions. It makes it tough to control our emotions. It also makes it difficult to remember things, right? So alcohol has a big impact on your limbic system and your hippocampus, which creates new memories. And if you drink too much alcohol, it can actually stop that part of your brain from making new memories, right? So you may be walking and talking and interacting with people, but you wake up the next morning and have no memory of what happened, right? Which is super scary. Alcohol also affects your cerebellum, right? Which is movement and balance, which is exactly why it's dangerous to drink and drive, right? So if it affects your movement and balance and you're behind the wheel of a car, that's super, super dangerous. We also see a lot of people getting hurt or accidentally dying because of falls, right? You don't make a great decision, your balance is off, you're not able to sort of control your movements, and bad things can happen. And then it also affects your brainstem, right? What's your brainstem do again? Breathing, right? Basic life functions. So alcohol is a depressant, right? Which means it slows down all of those messages up in your brain. It slows down your breathing, it slows down your heartbeat, it slows down your blood pressure, right? And if you drink too much alcohol by accident, it can slow those things down to the point where we sometimes see people going into comas or even dying, right? So there are some really serious unintended consequences that can happen as a result of drinking too much alcohol. Again, alcohol slows down your ability to think. It impacts your frontal lobe first, right? So if you already have an underdeveloped frontal lobe, like you do at your age, and then you make the poor decision to drink alcohol, what do you think your decision making looks like? Bad, right? You're probably not making the best choices in your life in that situation. It can cause dizziness and problems with coordination, makes it harder to speak, walk, and stay awake. It can cause people to pass out and cause memory loss. So I'm going to ask you to take your myth and fact cards out now. So myth or fact? Alcohol is a depressant, which means it slows down the brain's activities. That is a fact. Awesome job. How about this one? The use of alcohol when the brain hasn't fully developed can impair learning ability permanently. That's a fact, right? Great job. So again, because your brain is not fully developed, those changes to memory and learning and all of it can be permanent. How about this one? Alcohol affects everybody the same way. That's a myth. Great job. Again, everyone's brain's a little bit different. Everyone's body's a little bit different. Everyone is going to respond a little bit differently. The next drug that we're going to talk about is marijuana, or weed, or pot. It goes by many, many names. Thank you. So marijuana is a plant and a drug that's made up of more than 400 chemicals. The active chemical that causes the changes up in your brain and creates the high that people seek is called THC, or delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, right? It's a very long word that's abbreviated THC, right? The parts of your brain that marijuana affects are listed here. So it affects your cerebellum. So again, just like it's really dangerous to drink and drive, it's really dangerous to use marijuana and drive. Alcohol has a really big impact on your reaction time, right? It slows everything down, and if you're behind the wheel of a car, that's super, super dangerous, right? It affects your cerebral cortex. So again, it's going to make it difficult to speak and understand languages. You may forget what you were trying to say. You may not communicate yourself really clearly. You're not going to be able to understand what people are saying to you super well. And then it has a huge, huge impact on your limbic system. Who remembers what your limbic system does? Yep. Learning and memory, right? So the way that marijuana works, right, is while your brain's trying to send messages around and create new memories, the THC actually jumps in the middle and blocks that from happening, right? Now, the way I like to think of this, does anybody here have a brother or sister, or a pet even? Okay. Have you ever been trying to do something and your brother or sister or pet was being super annoying? Okay. Did it make trying to do that thing easier or harder? Harder, right? So marijuana and THC are kind of like the annoying brother or pet up in your brain, right? While your brain's trying to get stuff done and create new memories, it's jumping around in the middle trying to block that from happening. And just like with your younger brother or your brother or sister, it's not going to make it impossible to learn new things or create new memories, but it's going to make it much, much, much more difficult. And the tricky thing about marijuana is that it stays in your system for a really, really long time. Does anybody have a guess how long THC and marijuana stay in your system? Yep. A month is the low end. 6 months is the high end, right? So what that means is long after you have stopped feeling the effects of the drug, long after you've stopped feeling high, that THC is still up in your brain, making it tough to create new memories and learning new things. And if you use marijuana regularly, it just complicates the issue, right? Because if you use one time, that THC is up in your brain, creates a layer of difficulty, right? A layer of impact. And then maybe you wait a couple of days and whatever, you're bored, you're hanging out with your friends, you get high again, creates another layer. That first one's still there because it's been less than 30 days, right? And then maybe you wait a week or whatever and you get high again and there's another layer. And they just keep building on themselves, making it more and more and more difficult to create new memories and learn new things, right? So just keep in mind that long after you've stopped feeling the impacts of the drug, the changes are still happening up in your brain. It severely affects your lungs, especially if it's inhaled, right? Anything you put in your lungs other than air, or an inhaler if it's prescribed, I've got that one. But basically anything other than air is going to be damaging to your lungs. It can also increase your risk of heart attacks. Marijuana increases your heart rate and pulse, causes reddening in your eyes, dryness in your throat and mouth, drops your body temperature, and impacts your coordination and reaction time. So marijuana doubles the risk of car crashes if you're under the influence, right? It changes your brain. Again, as we said, and some of those changes can be permanent, causes memory problems, and makes learning difficult. So how about this? Marijuana is a plant, so it can't be harmful. What do you think, myth or fact? That's a myth, right? Absolutely. There are other things like poison ivy, poison oak. Those are harmful plants too, right? So it's definitely, just because it's a plant doesn't make it safe. How about this one? Marijuana can be an addictive drug. That's a fact, right? So marijuana, especially today's marijuana, because it is so strong, right? Some of the things that we're seeing, like dabs and waxes and oils, are incredibly strong forms of marijuana that are really, really dangerous to young people and are super addictive. The place that I work at, the facility that I work at, we start treating people as young as 13 who are struggling with addiction, right? We have many teenagers coming to us, and the majority of them are coming with a marijuana addiction, right? So it is possible to become both physically and psychologically addicted to marijuana. How about this one? Marijuana can cause problems with breathing, memory loss, and problem solving. Awesome job. That's a fact. Great job. So the next substance we're going to talk about is nicotine. Nicotine is a stimulant drug, right? So it speeds up all of those messages up in your brain. And it's found in things like cigarettes, cigars, pipe tobacco, and e-cigarettes. What do you all know e-cigarettes as? Vapes. I heard it somewhere in the back. Vapes. Everybody heard of vapes? No? Okay. So if you haven't, great. Vapes are, chew is smokeless tobacco. Dip, chew. Still has all of the same addictive properties as any other form. So vapes are relatively new on the market. Has anybody heard anything about vapes versus cigarettes? Any information? Yep. Yeah, so a vape is sort of a plastic pipe type thing versus a cigarette, which is paper. Yeah. So So vapes can help you reduce the amount of nicotine. Yep. So I've heard, and that's great, right? So many people have the misinformation that vapes are safer or healthier for you than cigarettes, right? The reality is vapes are not healthier or safer for you. They do contain nicotine, right? Nicotine is the addictive drug in anything. Also, vapes are really, really new on the market, right? They only came out a few years ago. And they came out and they were marketed as a safe alternative to smoking cigarettes. Now, the tricky part is the more that we learn about vapes, the more dangerous we know they are. The liquid itself, even without nicotine, right, is not water vapor, it's chemicals. And those chemicals have been connected with irreversible lung diseases, right? And that's just been in the last probably year that we have found that out. So the more we learn about them, it was the same thing with cigarettes when they first came out, right? When cigarettes first came out on the market, people did not know how dangerous they were, right? And so everybody smoked. You could smoke in schools, you could smoke in restaurants, you could smoke on airplanes, right? But then people found out how dangerous they were, and now you can't smoke anywhere, right? It's the same thing with vapes. The more we learn, the more dangerous we know they are. And even without that, the nicotine itself is very, very addictive. Nicotine is the most addictive drug out there. Right? It's more addictive than drugs like heroin or cocaine. So what that means is that, especially for a young person's developing brain, it doesn't take many times trying it to become addicted. So nicotine affects pretty much every organ in your body, right? It causes bad breath and wrinkled skin, increases your heartbeat and blood pressure, affects your lung function if you're inhaling anything, right? Increases your risk for illness and cancer, causes tooth decay and gum disease, all sorts of kind of gross stuff. So myth or fact, someone would have to smoke a lot of cigarettes to get addicted. That's a myth, right? Great job. Nicotine is super, super addictive. How about this one? E-cigarettes or vapes are safe to use? That is a myth, right? They are not. How about this one? Cigarettes are dangerous because they contain over 7,000 chemicals in each cigarette. That's a fact. That is a huge number of bad stuff to put in your body. So the last category of medications that we're going to talk about today are prescription medications, right? And I like to start this off, we're almost at the end, if you can just hold your question. So I like to start this portion off by saying, we're not talking about here, if you've got something going on, you get hurt or there's something else happening, and you go to the doctor with your parent or guardian or loved one, and you're given a prescription medication and you're taking it as prescribed with adult supervision, right? That's how prescription medications are supposed to be taken. In that way, they are safe, right? What we're talking about here is prescription medication misuse or abuse. So if you're taking more than is prescribed to you without talking to your doctor, if you or your parents or loved ones, if you are taking someone else's prescription medication, right, something that's not prescribed to you, or if you're combining a prescription medication with something else, another medication or maybe alcohol to increase the effect, right? In those cases, when prescription medications are misused or abused in these ways, they can be just as dangerous and deadly and addictive as street drugs, right? So it's just really important to keep in mind, oftentimes people think, well, a doctor prescribed it, even if it wasn't to me, how dangerous can it really be, right? And the truth is, if that prescription was not written for you, they can be incredibly dangerous and addictive. So the three categories of drugs we see most often misused and abused for young people are listed here. The first one are opioids. There's a lot in the news right now about the opioid epidemic. These are pain medications, right? So if you break your bone or you get your wisdom teeth out, your doctor is going to prescribe you one of these things to help your body deal with the pain so it can heal, right? In that way, they're very, very effective. If they are misused or abused in one of the ways that we just talked about, they're very, very addictive and dangerous. Then we have CNS depressants. These are used to treat anxiety, right? These are very, very addictive. The most common we see used among young people is called Xanax, right? And it's a very addictive drug and impacts your brain in the same way that, that alcohol does. And then we have stimulants. So these are medications that are often prescribed for ADD and ADHD and narcolepsy. And again, if these are prescribed to you by a doctor and you're taking them as prescribed, they're safe. If they are not, they can be very, very addictive, right? So the real reason not to do drugs is that they damage your brain and limit your potential, right? Here, we have a scan of 2 different brains. The one on the left is a person who does not use alcohol and other drugs. The one on the right is someone who has been misusing and abusing alcohol and other drugs for a period of time, right? What this particular scan of the brain measures are those connections, right? Those nerve cell connections up in your brain. So what do you notice about these 2 images, other than the rainbow color? That's just how the scan shows up. What do you notice about them? In the back, pink, yep. Mm-hmm.
One of them is like really pretty, and the other one looks very moldy.
Yeah, one of them looks kind of moldy, absolutely. Way in the back, yep.
One is like flat, the other one is all like gooey.
Yeah, right? So one looks smooth and round, right? So the healthy brain, where all of those connections are happening like they should, it looks smooth and round, right? Because the surface is being connected in the way that it should. The unhealthy brain, right? That's where someone who's been using and abusing drugs, those connections aren't happening, right? Those are the gaps and the holes that you see in the surface, right? So it's important to know that depending on how young you were when you start using, right? The younger that a person starts experimenting with alcohol and other drugs, the greater their risk of struggling with addiction. So for people who start experimenting around 13, 14 years old, they have almost a 50% chance of struggling with addiction later in life. So what that means is, like, let's say everyone in this room starts experimenting in the next couple of years, right? How old are you now? 11, right? So let's say in the next few years you start experimenting. Everybody in this room. I could draw a line down the middle, and half of you are likely to struggle with addiction later in life, right? The tricky part is we don't know which half, right? We don't know exactly why, and we don't know what factors determine that, right? It's different for everybody. But for every year that you wait to get your brain closer to that fully developed point at 25 to 30, right, even waiting until 21, your risk goes down by 14% every year, right? So the longer you wait to try these things, to get your brain closer to that fully developed stage, the lower your risk of ever struggling with addiction. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So some quick tips to resist, right? The reason we're having these conversations with you now, hopefully you haven't faced one of these choices, right? But so that you're prepared when you do. So that you know what your answer is going to be when you come up against one of these situations, and you're prepared to deal with it, right? Because you never know when it's going to happen. It might be a friend or someone you care about who's offering you these things. And so being prepared is the best way that you can protect yourself to make the best decision, right? So standing up straight, making good eye contact, just saying no, right? You can say, no, I'm not interested in that. You don't need to come up with an excuse. You can just, I always say it's always okay to walk away from a situation you don't feel comfortable with, right? Always. And just letting them know that this is not a decision that you're interested in, right? You can give them reasons, you cannot give them reasons, right? But just knowing and being confident in whatever choice you make for yourself. So the healthy mind platter. These are all of the things that you need to be a happy, healthy, well-rounded young person, right? A couple I like to point out. Sleep time. Who knows how much sleep time is recommended for people your age? Yes. More than 8 to 10. Yep. So 10 to 12, right? 10 to 12 hours. Yeah. Who here gets enough sleep? Okay, so a few of you. Very, very, very few young people. Very few young people are getting enough sleep, right? And it's really important to just know that, because your brains are super busy all day developing, learning all of that new stuff, right? Doing all of the things that they need to do, and they need that time to rest and be able to get up and do it again the next day, right? So it's really important to just know how much is recommended. Everybody needs physical time, which is between 30 to 60 minutes a day or more, depending on the person. Focus time or time in, right, which is school time or homework time, something where you're focused on a specific task. Then everybody needs downtime and playtime, unstructured, hanging out, doing whatever, like whatever you like to do for fun, that needs to be in there too. And then everybody also needs, all young people need connecting time. So what do you think is not included in connecting time that young people do a lot of today? Snapchat, right? Snapchat. Did you have something else? Snapchat, video games, right? Anything where there's a screen, anything where there's a screen between you and that other person, right? We don't count towards connecting time. The face-to-face communication and interaction with other people is really, really important for your developing brains. So that is all that I have for you all. Thank you so much for your attention. We had 4 minutes.